Oh, sorry. I can speak louder. Is that working? Oh, okay. Okay. Hello, everyone. My name is Roxanne Harris, and I perform as also known as Rox. And I use Sonic Pi as my music live coding tool of choice at the moment. And today I'll just be running through some of the tutorials that's given in Sonic Pi and like just getting us started with using it. And then we'll have some exploration time to see, we'll just have some exploration. So if you're on a laptop and you want to follow along, the first thing you have to do is download Sonic Pi. So I'll walk through that process. So you should be able to Google. There we go. Google Sonic Pi. Should be the first thing. Oh, actually, it's not showing up on my computer. Oh. There we go. Amazing. So you download Sonic Pi by going to sonicpi.net here, and then depending on your operating system, you can have Windows. Go click on it, and it takes you right to where you have the installer. So there it is for Windows, and there it is for Mac OS. And then after that installation process, if you can give me a thumbs up if you have Sonic Pi downloaded, that'd be great. So I'll be checking for. I think most folks do, so I think that'd be good to continue. Okay, cool. So this is Sonic Pi, and I think if there's no better person other than the creator of Sonic Pi, Sam Aaron, to welcome you to Sonic Pi, which was created for the purpose of teaching 10-year-olds how to learn the computer science, the fundamentals of computer science. So if 10-year-olds can do it, we all can do it. Or at least I hope so. I hope that I could do it. But more importantly, that idea of like do all of the functionality so that a 10-year-old can understand is just to have that art of simplicity still be at the heart of the core functionality of Sonic Pi, and then you can build on those simple parts to make more complex systems. It's really like for me to get in. So the Wi-Fi. If you need Wi-Fi, Wi-Fi is the cell Wi-Fi. That is the name of the Wi-Fi, and the password is kitty cat. And this is wrong there, kitty cat with a C. C is lowercase. It's a C. Okay, cool. I think I covered all the basic stuff. So let's just walk through just how to get some sounds. So I'm gonna do this. Start from scratch. So to just get a sound out of Sonic Pi, you can say play and give it a number. And the number that you see represents a MIDI note number, which corresponds to a note on the piano keyboard. So play 60 is the same thing as saying play like the note C. The sound the same. So this would be the first example of like seeing that there's many ways to write the same kind of code. And it's all about personal preference at this point. So it says it's your first speech. Hey, heard a beat. Let's go. You can provide options. Also, if you need to see the help and follow along in the help file here, you can go up to your. I'm gonna highlight it on the top left of my screen. If you go to view, it should say somewhere in there show help, or you can do Alt-I or something like that, and then you can see this entire help tutorial that I'll just be flipping through. So for these play options, you can supply extra external arguments. So see here that they say that you can tell the synth that you want cheese to equal 1 and beans to equal 0.5 and all this stuff. Just for an example of like, you could still supply arguments to it, but it won't really do anything because it's not a valid argument. But more valid argument could be amp which in this case stands for amplitude, which will affect the loudness of the sound. So this is our regular sound. Make it super quiet. Make it not super loud, but more loud. More prominently. So loud that if you if you put the loudness too high for any particular like synth or function, you'll start to SonicFi has an internal compressor that's happening, or compression system that's happening with the audio. So have the volume too loud and you'll get that distorted sound, which you might want, which might be deserved. So go crazy. SonicFi code is read top down for the most part, so you can sequence. You can start to sequence like a, let's say, like a sequence of notes by telling it how long to wait in between each note, which you would do using the sleep function. So you would say, and let me know. Actually, before I go any further, can everyone see my screen? Fine. Is it good? Okay. Like the code, I can always make it bigger. The help file I can't make bigger for some reason, but I can make my code bigger. So I say sleep, like, oh, let's see, which sides are, oh, I see. Is that better? No. Is that better? Sick. Amazing. So, yeah. So we can make a melody, simple melody, just going, say C, or loud, just start C, with D, C for 3.5 again. You can just start to sequence all of these kinds of things. Quiet D, land on a triumphant B flat. Other than affecting the amplitude, you can affect, there's a lot more arguments that you can supply to a synth, like panning. I'm not sure how crazy this will be. I don't know how, if it's getting stereo, but we might do it. Oh yeah, kind of bounced between the speakers. That was pretty good. So yeah, this is just a simple way to just get started in terms of just sequencing notes and things like that. You can see how this can very much get, long. And especially if you want to sequence things, you don't want to have like, if you have like whole Bach piece that you're trying to translate into SonicFi, I doubt you'd want every note to occupy a line and sleep in and everything like that. So one way we can get through that is by, I want to introduce the concept of a live loop. And you're also seeing like me comment out code. My shortcut for it, I think, is alt and then the / to comment things out with the code. But I don't know what that, maybe like control / is like the equivalent on that. But you can either do that to comment out your code, or if you want to do it manually, you can just put a hash in front of all of them. Takes a little bit more time, but it's just super valid, just as effective. If you don't want to delete your code, I just want to keep it there so you see where we're going. So a fundamental part of like getting into the live coding nature of SonicFi is that you have the concept of the live loop. Now you supply an arbitrary name, so I'm going to just say foo, and then you basically say, you define what you want to happen in the loop within the do and block. If you try to run this, SonicFi will always give an error saying that the loop did not sleep or sync, which is pretty important that it checks for that, because unless you tell SonicFi when to re-execute this block as it should loop, it'll just infinitely, try to execute as fast as possible, and it'll probably just crash. So you tell it to sleep. Now it's, you don't hear anything because we don't have like a play or anything like there. We don't have a function that's generating sound. But the loop is running and we don't have a purple friendly message. So if we put play C, what we were doing before in this loop, now you should hear the loop. I think a big part of what I may have missed a little earlier, that might make it a little bit easier to follow along, is that I use these shortcuts to run Sonic 5, but the easiest thing to do, if you make a change to your code and you want to run it, is to press is that you press the play button up here, top left, and then if you want the execution to stop, then you press the stop. And then you can also record what you're doing with the record button and so on. But the concept of a live loop is that after I already defined it, so it is running. So if I change this actually, right, let's see. Yoshi's are slightly bigger, but you can see on the right here, there's like a lot of things that say live loop foo. So this is your queue log. Your queue log will give you information about certain things that are happening within Sonic 5, especially pertaining to different queues or actions that are happening and being executed. So you're seeing all these foos because every time foo or the live loop foo gets re-executed, it brings on a new message into the queue log. So if I change the name of this live loop to boo, or maybe something a little bit more different, so you can see it, you'll see that it starts executing here every second. That's different from boo. So you'll know it's running, but we're not hearing anything. And you can see it's still running, and I haven't stopped the process, but I'm changing the code that's in it to add on to the process. So in fact, you can do this. You can copy what we did before, put it in the live loop, and you change change a already executing process to kind of build on your ideas and not have to keep re-executing it every time or start from something really fresh. Now let's say you wanted to like change, right now we're just hearing the regular sine wave every time as the texture of it. But let's say we wanted to change the nature of the synth that we're playing without having to go in and change all the code that we wrote before. So let me bring this up. Because the resolution of this screen is slightly different from my screen. So if I can bring your attention to the top, the bottom left, the bottom of the screen. In addition to the tutorial help files, I encourage you to go through and find all of the lower structures of it on Sonic 5. We have synths as well, and we got a list of all the synths that are in Sonic 5. So right now, the one that we were hearing is beat, which is just a simple sine wave. So if I scroll up here and I give the command new synth beat, it will tell the play function to use that sound as like the texture of the note. So this is what we had before by default. So using basic FM synthesis or frequency modulation to have its arguments. So that's how you can start getting into sound design with your sounds. Continuing to build off of this example in this style, because there's so many ways to write sound and structure your code in Soundify, but it's good to just keep building on what we've seen before. So if useSynth is telling the play function what kind of, like, which of these synths to use is like to generate the sound, you can use useSynth defaults. So if I do this, I have it here, you can specify what default values do you want to be, what arguments do you want to supply to that synth that will be applied across the board, essentially. So if we go back to, if I go back at least to FM, you'll see that the list of available, let's go, love that. You'll see the arguments that you can supply FM, the FM synth, which are different, sometimes different depending on what synths you have. Some have more, some have less, some have specific things. But for FM, we got some cool stuff here. We got depth. So let's play around with depth. You could say depth. So right now it's just 1. Let's say 2. Let's give it more extreme. Let's play with the visor. Just this one over here. So this is 2. Let's make it smaller. So, yeah. So, getting really, once you have like the basics of knowing how to access certain sounds, and then how supplying options, knowing the options that you can supply to those sounds gets you into like more specific, gets you to like find the specific sound that you're looking for. Now, let's say like you wanted to experiment or you either wanted to experiment or you just wanted to like randomize some processes and like have it like, you wanted to randomize some processes. Let's say I really liked divisor being 1, 2, and 4. Right? So I would put the values that I want in a list, and then I can say there's a lot of ways you can do randomization or iterating through a list. But the simplest way to do it with randomization is to give it a list of the values that you want to be able to choose from, and then say .choose. And this is the simplest way to supply randomness into your algorithm, or into whatever you're trying to play. So that's a simple way to do that. Now let's say like we're hearing it, but even I can kind of guess based on what I know, but I don't know what values are being chosen here. And let's say I wanted to like, I'm not even live coding, well, I'm live coding, but I want to find the values that feel good to me, and I want to like be like, maybe 4 is the bad value, or maybe 1 is the bad value. So you can, something I often do is extrapolate these things out into a variable. So like I would say maybe divisor equals, copy this over here, equals that list that I just did, apply the value here, and then you could say something like puts, which is just a print statement in Ruby, say puts divisor, so that I talked about the Q log before. You can see the current running processes over here. There's also this log that's over here. That'll give you, that's where your print statements will appear. didn't want to be, now I feel like I like all these values. Let's say I didn't want to randomly choose to the values, and I wanted to kind of tick through the array, or I wanted to iterate through it. There's a lot of ways to do that too, but SonicPy-centric way is supplying the value, or putting in the live loop this function called tick. Now tick, right here, tick, the way I think about tick is that it's like once that live loop starts running, it's like a clock. Every time that live loop, like especially if you every call to tick is like, if you have like a clock, it's just like ticking it every time. And so when this live loop keeps re-executing, tick is gonna keep like just ticking through like a clock. So the way that you can check the value of where tick currently is if I change this to look and put this up here so they're together. Let me start to separate this stuff. Bring this down. Then by saying puts look, you can see where that tick value is. So it starts at 0. So at this point, I'm like, I also want to like show that it still is just ticking at the same rate every time that loop re-executes. But let's say I wanted to like have, well, yeah, no, I do want to do this. If I wanted to change the BPM or the rate of like what's going on, right now the default BPM is 60 beats per second. So that means that all of these values supplied to sleep, so 0.5, 0.5, 0.5, and this entire, if you add all of those together, this entire loop will re-execute after two beats, because these represent beat values rather than actual time values, or they're relative to the current BPM. So if I change the BPM to be 120, it should go twice as fast, even though I didn't change any of the values. It's pretty cool. And instead of choosing like a random value from this divisor list, I'm going to say look, and I'm going to add that extra one just for symmetry, and it will just kind of, to demonstrate this, just have this print in the log here. So yeah, so those are some basics of SonicPy. Before I finish, or at least start to get into some experimental things, as well as like take any questions, or I mean I can always take questions, but the thing I do mostly in SonicPy is I use a lot of the synths, but I also really like to get into samples. So I'll briefly show that SonicPy has a given library of samples already to choose from that you can kind of like, nice. You can go in and see how they all sound. A lot of them are strange, and that's like the best part. Nice. So all of these are kind of available sounds that you have in SonicPy. So I think maybe I want like a. This is a great time to also showcase. So we have like a melody kind of going on over here. I'm going to comment these statements out. If I want with live loops, you can have a concurrent live loop running, or you can have more than one. So let's say that this is live loop A, then live loop B. I'm just going to make another one down here. That's going to sleep. That's going to re-execute itself every beat. And I want like a bass drum or something. So let's say bass hit C. You write sample and then the name of the sample that you want to use. You can also use external samples in SonicPy, which is what I usually do, or like samples that I put in. I can also briefly show that, but this is a great way to just get started. Yes, of course. The question was, how soon does the code that you just wrote re-execute from the time that you press the run button? It depends. So the it, the code itself will be read and like received by the computer instantly, as instantly as it's receivable for us. But in the case of like, so this is a great example. So let's say we bring this to 2. Let's say I wanted to edit something happening in this loop, in this A loop. It takes 2 seconds to re-execute the contents of like, it takes two seconds or two beats. It takes 2 beats for the live loop A to like finish like running until it gets re-executed. So any changes that you make within that time period won't be reflected, but it'll be reflected on the next iteration of the live loop. So if I run it, depending on what live coding system that you're using and or how your stuff is kind of set up, the changes that you write won't be reflected instantaneously, which could be desirable in case you're fiddling around with something or you're waiting for a dropper or something. But also, depending on the live coding style that you're trying to do, it might be undesirable. So oftentimes in a lot of live loops that I do, I try to leave the sleep time. But actually, I try to leave the sleep time as low as possible, usually at like 1. If I make this extra live loop C, if I were to rewrite this code, this live loop code, to be able to reflect my changes almost instantaneously every beat, I would put the notes that I did here into an array. Yeah, so I'd iterate through them. Since I have a simple example. In this case, since they all have the same sleep time, I have this kind of going, say tick, then I think I would leave everything as is here. I'll leave out some defaults. Then I think I'll just if I just don't have this play, stop this. You see that it so it's a lot faster on the turnover. Is a lot faster. Great question. Yeah. Silly questions are welcome. Oh, yes. There are things that do say there are limitations to these things. So if I go back to FM, and yes, yeah, of course. The question was, how do you know the limitations of, like, what values can you supply to what arguments, and what are the range of values, valid values that you can put in there? So if you were to do amp, you said, what was the value you said? 9,000? Oh, yeah, let's say 9,000. So no, absolutely. But you know, you can go as high as you want with that. You're just gonna just get it doesn't notice the sound didn't get any louder. It just got more distorted. But for some things, like let's say like the divisor, we try to send divisor. So if I go in basic FM synthesis, before the options that I was doing was like divisor, right? So you can scroll, and then here it is, divisor. Modifies the frequency of the modulator oscillator relative to the area. See, you're not even told to like worry too much about what it means, you know? So I think the one I chose in particular, definitely you can do anything, I think, so let's try it. I don't know. Let's see, like cutoff, it's saying it gives you what the default value is. Then it's saying it must be 0 or greater, and the value must be less than 130. So if I give this 3, so cutoff, so this is just recently got updated, so some errors might be more lenient than others. Let me try to break another thing. I don't want to break it now. Release time. Yeah, no, it just doesn't give you any. I gave the release time of like, what was that? 10,000 beats. So I think that was never gonna work. But there is a range, and even though it didn't error out now, which is actually kind of nice because there's a whole explanation I can give for that after. But that means that your live loop probably won't stop executing and stuff, so you can like keep going. Like it won't tell you that you're like tripping, but like you should know what the range is, so you know like okay, beyond this value won't have any real effect on it. Like if I give play like maybe a note it's like -10 or something. Yeah, it's just like it just keeps going, so you won't hear it. But yeah, I think the last thing I want to do before I design, I wanted to make sure there's some time for questions. Yes. Yeah. I use values usually between like it also depends on like if you're using a sample, for example, right? Sometimes the sample is like bad, like low. So sometimes I'll just like amp that up to 7. Or let me see. Let me give you an example. So if I want bass house. Sometimes I like to put a low pass filter on it. It's a little bit more thumpy, but you see how it's really low. So if I want to pump that up, I usually do this. Everyone's like, yeah, I like that. Yeah. So it all kind of depends. You just gotta play it by ear. Yeah. Is there any other questions before I do the final thing and the error? Great question. I will repeat the question. What format are you supposed to save your file in? So you can save by going to. I apologize, the drop down won't appear, but if you go to code up here in the top left, there will be an option to save or load in a Sonic 5 file. So you just save that, and then it's whatever you want, and then it's just a regular text file. So that is super good. So I've built a lot of like my own custom libraries and functions for this kind of thing. There's more advanced stuff that I can always talk to you about. So always feel free to reach out to me as well about sci-fi stuff. I love doing it. But this, I will show you what I was doing to prepare for the set that will be tonight, which is going to be super sick. So I'm literally, you can see my comments. But I created this like function that I don't feel like explaining right now. But pretty much, I had this idea where a lot of times I write, if I can, a lot of times I write my code or like a pattern in this format to get like a 4 to the floor kind of feeling, right? But my computer science brain was like, for me, it works as a shortcut to think about. I don't know how many people are familiar with like hexadecimal notation, but if I read like, if I convert these into like a hexadecimal format, pretty much I would write it, instead of writing that longer string, I would just write 888, because 8. This is like super specific to me, but I'm showing this as an example of like where you can take it with your own brain. Take it your own brain and then find things that shorthand conventions that work for you, and can talk more about that individually with anybody after. But in binary, this kind of looks like this, like that in binary, which if you convert it to like a string, just that. So these kind of equal each other, which is pretty simple. And one of my favorite patterns to do is the 3-8 pattern, which kind of looks like this. So I'll just put that, yeah. So that pattern that everyone really loves, I know everyone knows that one, comes out of like the 9 being equal to 0, 0, 1 in binary, and then the 2 being equal to 0, 0, 1. So when you concatenate or whatever those things together, you get this kind of pattern, which is equivalent to this. And so instead of writing that longer string now I just write all of my strings in hexadecimal format. And then I get a lot of these cool little values and things going. So let me see if before we end, if I can, I was sending all of my sounds to Ableton, but maybe I can quickly, I don't even know what this is saying, but let's see. So I had that pattern going at the first lecture. If I just put this, I put like a bass, do that like ASAP before. So these would be sending out, you can send out MIDI, so like other things, like if you use a DAW or something, you can use that. But in addition to that, let's see. Yeah. Nice. Wait, let's bring up that BPM to what I really like. This is 160 BPM. Let me also close this. So now let's see what it's doing. Specifically kind of made for myself, but you're saying what is P? So P in this case corresponds to this little number, which corresponds to this little number. You can tell that I just wrote this because none of the variable makes sense. But this number is the index coming from this P, and you know, you just pointed out such a great thing because I rewrote that value, but it's okay because it's Ruby. So it doesn't actually get reflected. But pretty much it's all coming from it equals this, which is the index of this. Basically it's telling you Yeah, your list. So it tells me which one. So it tells me which one to do. Yeah, yeah. So that's what. That is what key is. In fact, I'm going to change that to an A arbitrarily, and it won't change anything. I think. Oh. Okay. We're fine now. I need to do this. Let me see. I don't know what to put here, so I can say so that corresponds to this pattern, which is the same as as you're hearing, yeah. Let's just copy this and see where it or not. Oh yeah, I forgot this. It doesn't make sense. Yeah. So I mean, I have to pad it, and do all that. That's where like this thing is coming from. So it's just super suspicious. But I'm just showcasing like where you can go with it, pretty much. This is just like where you can go with it kind of thing. Where, I mean, if you're interested, it's just take that string, you convert it to an integer. You're recognizing that it's like the actual string is a hexadecimal thing here, so it gets converted into like a whole decimal number you can see. And you convert that decimal number into binary, and then you pad it to the right with like zeros and stuff to make it that. And then depending on what mode I give it, like it does some extra stuff, but that is pretty much it. And uh, another thing that I've done is like that you could do is like have different patterns like that come from like across a lot of different cultures, or just things go tos to have, where you have different levels of patterns going on and what patterns work well together. Being able to see like similarities between patterns, like that 999 kind of thing going on. Um, so you can really start to just build your own personal library of things to do. And with that, I will conclude my workshop. And thank you all for coming and being here. Yay. Yeah. Oh yeah. Feel free to talk to me if you have any questions, anything. I mean, once you memorize it, like, yeah, yeah, it's nice because then you can do operations on the. Then you can do operations on the decimals that are on the hexadecimals that you wouldn't usually be able to do, and find like related patterns and things like that. Yeah, exactly, exactly. Like a lot of the deep house and deeper house stuff has that fourth. Like I recognize 888 now, and my brain is like 4 to the 4, which is giving you the you know what I mean. And you got in different kinds of like layers of stuff, like the FFFF. That usually corresponds to some kind of like hi hat structure. Um, there's the footwork 1992 thing, and with the extra B at the end. Yeah, it starts that, if this is new, also, I only devised this. I mean, I've been thinking about it, but I only devised like a function to do it, like 2 days ago. So, I'll be experimenting as I always am for all of my tests. So, hopefully, yeah. Yeah. No, that's exactly the vibe that I'm going for. I'm so glad I feel so glad and understood. It's like amazing. Definitely my favorite though right now. I mean, since people are just still vibing, so this like Dahu pattern. I do rotating. I actually might have something. No, I said. Oh, actually. Oh, I did this. See, this is why it's great to save your code. 'Cause then less work for you later, which is amazing. think I like 3 times. And then I have to do execute this, and then put this away, and maybe it's away. It's not quiet, so I'm just gonna. And I need to put the BPM back because that was at 60 BPM. Yeah. So I love that one. Right? Like that's pretty nice. So, yay!